Hey there, I am Alex, the Silver Mont, and I recently got the chance to play Dark Souls 2 on PlayStation 4, the Scholar of the First Sin edition. And well, here are my thoughts. First up, big thanks to Namco for inviting me down to their secret headquarters and giving me the chance to play. So let's get right in. Starting up, we went with the transition from the PS3 version to the PS4 version, played a few minutes of the former and before swapping over to the latter. And the biggest immediate change I noticed was the frame rate. Dark Souls 2 didn't exactly have a terrible frame rate, but unless you played on PC, you were generally sitting at the 24 to 30 mark, and sometimes it would go up, sometimes it would go down, but it was generally a 30 FPS experience. Dark Souls 2 on PS4, and presumably Xbone, runs at 60 frames per second, and seems to keep around that mark too. I didn't have any frame rate measuring equipment with me, but I didn't notice any jarring frame drops, even when a Drake started spewing fire at me, and even when a bunch of enemies were on screen, far more than I ever remember seeing in the vanilla Dark Souls 2. The frame rate change it's nice. If you've watched a lot of my videos, you'll know that I'm not obsessed with 60 FPS, but what I do want from a game is consistency. I only really am bothered by frame rates when I notice them in a negative light. For instance, Blighttown. It's impossible not to notice it. I mean, I hardly ever noticed frame rates, but man, in Blighttown it goes down to like 10 sometimes, maybe less than 10, and that is noticeable and that's horrible. But yeah, the PS4 version seemed to be running smoothly. It wasn't a final build that I was playing either, and I didn't notice anything in the way of bugs though, although at one point a Hollow decided to die in a very suspect manner, and he was kind of like, let's just say he assumed the position on the floor. Yeah. And even when comparing side by side with footage on YouTube, it's hard to tell the difference without actually seeing it on your own TV, as I know that sounds really cliche, you gotta see it for yourself, but you do. I mean, I've looked at the IGN video on YouTube and it's like, then when you actually play it, it's like, oh okay, that's a pretty nice difference actually. The other large visual change would be the resolution boost, which, well, there's not too much to speak about there. It's a bump up to 1080p from, I think it was 720 on Xbox 360 and PS3, and it really helps because Dark Souls models, the armors and weapons, they're so rich with detail. You really need to be playing the game in as high a resolution as possible to highlight all of that awesome work they've put in. When it's in low resolution, it gets all blurry and you can't really, you can't make out the detail because it's too small. If you've played Dark Souls 2, like, on Xbox or PS3, on a big screen TV, you'll probably notice the game can look pretty ugly at times. It's not the art style or anything like that, it's just the game is being stretched to a resolution that is, the resolution is too small, but the picture's too big. It's like taking a low-res JPEG and just stretching it. It looks rubbish, yeah? Even if the actual picture is like some amazing, I don't know, piece of art. What I'm trying to say though is the resolution bump is very nice there. There also appear to have been some changes to the colour saturation and general lighting. With the saturation, that might just be the TV that I was playing on, but they might have also adjusted the colours a bit, I'm not sure. But well, we're not getting the original or E3 lighting or whatever you want to call it. And it's not a huge difference, although like there are times when I would stop and go, it looks like the lighting here is a bit different, a bit more bloom perhaps, or more sun rays or whatever. And if you've been playing on PC, you've already got 1080p, you've already got 60 FPS, and you've already got mods that make it look damn close to the original, like, lighting engine or whatever. So, moving on from the visuals, let's talk about the other new features in the Scholar of the First Sin edition. Well, there's expanded multiplayer, but I didn't get to see that because it wasn't like online and connected or whatever. It wasn't a final build. And if you aren't entirely sure what's in what version, I've included a handy link in the description that you can check out, which summarizes what each, what's on the PS3 version, what's on the PS4 version, and so on. But going back to the gameplay, the main draw here is that Dark Souls 2 on PS4 and Xbone and PC, the new version of PC, not the old one, blah. So, Scholar of the First Sin edition, it's gonna kind of, like, remix or master quest sort of thing, there are now enemies in different positions. Sometimes it's as simple as removing the Haid Knight in the Forest of Fallen Giants, but then also populating Haid's Tower of Flame with a number of the ponderous Solaire lookalikes. And in other situations, things change in more interesting ways. For example, I entered the Lost Bastille and ran along the ramparts, and was then shot by a very cleverly placed crossbow hollow, who was positioned in like a vantage spot where it's there in the game at the moment, like the original version of the game, but there's no enemies, there's nothing there, it's just like a spot. And but now there's a guy there, and he can snipe you from like if he was playing Call of Duty, he would be really good at camping, let's just say that. He has wide coverage of a huge area. Was it a cheap placement? Not really, because I could have seen him if I had actually looked over there. I didn't expect him to be there, so I ran without looking and then got shot and blown up, because he didn't aim at me, he aimed at a barrel, which then blew up, and I was like, oh, okay. So you're going to want to be keeping an eye out, because you might find some enemies in some pretty unexpected places. I don't want to spoil too much about that, because I mean, that's like the main thing, as far as I'm concerned, is the remixed enemy stuff. Although I will tell you now that Masterless Glencower, the summon in Haid, he hates Haid Knights with a passion, and he will attack them. They'll be sleeping or sitting down, and he will run over and bash them on their head, and most times it seems they will stand up and then push him into the water, and he will die horribly. So we have new enemy placements, larger multiplayer lobbies, which is up to 6 people I think, and enhanced visuals. Is that enough to warrant a purchase? Honestly, I can't answer that for you, because it depends on your own, personal, sense of value and things like that. I can tell you my thoughts on the matter though. I'm gonna get it on PS4, because whilst I do think Dark Souls 2 isn't as good as the first Dark Souls, I do enjoy Dark Souls 2 a lot. And, I'm curious, I want to see these new enemy placements. It's like New Game Plus on crack, kind of remixed stuff, I don't know. And I think access to larger fight clubs is going to be pretty nice, because, well, you know me, I like to host fight clubs now and then, and, having larger fight clubs is nice. As long as they don't lag, which, I don't think that'll be a problem. I always figured it was more of like a hardware limitation from the Xbox 360 and PS3 not being able to handle as many people on screen, but whatever. The way I see it, this is basically a Game of the Year re-release. They did it with Dark Souls 1 with Artorias of the Abyss edition for Xbox. It basically got you the original game and Artorias of the Abyss, like, bundled up. And this is, well, you get the game on PS4 with all the DLC bundled in, and you get some new things in addition to that. So I think that's, like, if you already have the game, it might be hard to argue the value of it, because it really is subjective and depends on how much you enjoy Dark Souls. Dark Souls 2, even. But, well, I suppose it's overlooked, but there is also the new ending in item descriptions, because that's not technically exclusive to the PS4 and Xbone version. It's, we all got that in the patch. But the problem here is the PC version. That's where I see the problem, because you're not really getting a huge visual boost there, probably, I'm guessing. And, it's already 1080p, it's already 60 FPS, and it's dividing the player base. So on PS3, there's only one version of Dark Souls 2. Everyone is on there. It'll be the same for PS4, but on PC, people who have the new version won't be able to play people who have the old version, And I don't think dividing the player base is a good idea in that sense. So, I'm not really sure what to think of that, to be honest. I imagine most, hardcore fans will probably make the upgrade, if only so they have the most recent, version of the game. And the pricing of the PC version, from what I understand, has not been finalized either. So, I mean, there are possibilities for deals to occur, like, if you already have Dark Souls 2, maybe you'll get a discount for the new version. Those are my kind of rambling thoughts, though. On PS4 and Xbone, I would argue that it is worth it if you plan to be playing more Dark Souls 2, which in my case, I do. On PC, not so much. And now, with that out of the way, I will talk a little more about my experience playing. There will be some spoilers from this point on, so, feel free to stop watching, but if you have any more questions, you can ask them in the comments below. But yes, some spoilers, mostly about enemy placements and, you know, what I ran into whilst playing the game for about an hour and a half or so. No huge spoilers though. But so, in that hour and a half that I spent playing, I ran into numerous places where my progress was blocked by a petrified enemy, meaning, you know, I'd need a fragrant branch of yore to proceed. And at one point, this happened in a very bad spot in the Lost Bastille. It's, let's just say, there's a spot that kills a lot of players in the game, like, right now, and they've kinda made that even worse. And, I might be remembering this weirdly, but at one point I'm sure that I saw a new door or like passage that didn't originally exist, and that was also blocked by a petrified enemy statue. I might have just forgotten about that particular place though, because let's face it, sometimes my memory sucks, but there are definitely petrified enemies blocking your way now and then, which means you might have to come back to some areas a bit later, including, interestingly enough, one in the tutorial area, the place which I forget the name of. Things Betwixt, I think? So, then there's the Forest of Fallen Giants, which has a very interesting ambush. Climbing up the ladder to the Haid Knight, or where he used to be, I got the impression something was wrong, because the knight wasn't there, so I was like, huh. So I climbed the ladder slowly, I scoped the area out, I went to the side, climbed the other ladder, you know, up by the tower, where the sniper guy is. I had a look around there, and I was like, okay. Then, the Bamco rep showed me what happened to him when he played that part. He also climbed the ladder and noticed the lack of a Haid Knight, so he ran over to the tree where there's a few items. At which point, all the enemy hollows sat up, that had been, you know, lying on the floor, and chased him, so he ran over to the tower, like where I had gone. And when he attempted to climb the ladder, there was an enemy climbing down the ladder and started kicking him in the head. So he jumps off the ladder, turns around, and there's like, at this point, probably at least 10 hollow soldiers. Well, at this point it basically turned into Dynasty Warriors Dark Souls. Only with a rather grim ending. Because he's trapped, he can't go back the way he came, because there's like 10 enemies there. Can't go up the ladder, so he sort of hops off the side, lands on a branch, and he's safe there for a bit. And then one of the hollows just kind of falls off, and pushes him, and he falls down and dies. Yeah, so that happened. And it might... Now this is something I don't know for certain, I'm just speculating. I think that the PlayStation 4 and Xbone version might, and of course the new PC version, will have a higher on-screen enemy count. But again, I don't really remember the most amount of enemies we ever saw at once in vanilla. I mean, I remember at Dranglake Castle, as you're opening the gate, quite a few enemies came out, like round the side, but, I mean, there were so many hollow soldiers in that Forest of Fallen Giants, like, at least 10 all at once. It must have been at least 10. But, you know, the most devious change of all that I ran into? My nemesis, Lycia of Lindelt. She's been moved, ever so slightly. You probably won't even notice that she's been moved. So I was talking to the rep about how I make a habit of punishing her for her transgressions by knocking her off the edge every time I like go through Haid, so I won't have to fight her later in the room of eternal Wrath of God pain in Majula. So after knocking her down, I realised she's still alive, because they moved her just a few feet to the side so that instead of falling into the ocean, she falls onto the steps where you run up. So I had no choice but to roll down the steps and then dagger her into the ocean manually. So, to be honest, I am expecting a lot of sneaky, devious changes along the lines of going from New Game to New Game Plus, but, you know, even more so, even more like, oh, that shouldn't be there, what the hell, I'm now dead. Yeah, like the Shadow Assassins in No Man's Wharf, who almost gave me a heart attack. Yeah. In particular, I want to see the DLC areas, because those are already pretty devious, and if those got remixed too, it's probably going to be pretty painful. One area in particular. The, Tundra Wastes in Aleum Lois, with all the frozen reindeers. Yeah, I bet they've made that area even more horrible somehow. I think that about covers it, as, you know, I don't want to give away too much of what I saw, but for the most part, yeah, positive experience. Has it completely revolutionized Dark Souls 2 from the ground up? No. it's still Dark Souls 2. Is it a much better product than Dark Souls 2 at release? Subjectively, yes. The devs have implemented a lot of changes that, as a community, we've asked for. And I think that's a good sign, to be honest. Like, you know, this soul memory, the weapon changes, although I hope the Scholar of the First Sin patch did something to the Chaos Blade, because frankly that weapon was ridiculous. But yeah, it's still Dark Souls 2, so if you hate Dark Souls 2, you probably don't want anything to do with this. If you like Dark Souls 2, I think you'll enjoy it. Me, I like Dark Souls 2. I complain about Dark Souls 2 a lot, as you probably know if you've seen my videos, but that's because I care about the game and I want the game to be, you know, as good as it can be. So to reiterate my earlier point, I think the re-release, the Scholar of the First Sin, is worth picking up on Xbone or PS4 if you enjoy Dark Souls 2. As for the PC version, that is a lot harder to, like, suggest, and I'm not probably going to get it unless they give, like, a really good discount, but, you know, that's ultimately, it's up for you to decide. And of course, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you so much for watching, and again, a big thanks to Namco for inviting me down to their headquarters. Until next time, you guys take care, and I will see you very soon.